Welcome, welcome. We are excited to share with you a webinar on youth councils and how what some of the things to consider and some of the things we're eager to learn from you as well. My name is Julie Rogers Bascom, along with Anthony Lay. We welcome you. We are with NYLC, the National Youth Leadership Council. NYLC has been around for over 40 years, and we do lots of work around youth leadership. We use service learning as one of the strategies to really allow young people to learn how to make change. One of those things that we support is an advisory council, a youth advisory council. We'll hear from Anthony, and I'm really glad he's here because he is the person who leads our youth advisory council in partnership with the young people. Just a little bit about NYLC. If you're new to NYLC, we do lots of things. We do trainings, we do coaching, we work with curriculum and resources. At the end of the webinar, I'll tell you how to access some of those free resources. We have a service learning conference coming up in April, which is an awesome time to see young people in action and some of the work that they're doing in partnership with adults, and what service learning looks like in the classroom and outside of the classroom. As we're starting, if you could open up your chat, put your name and where you're from, and maybe why did you choose to come to this webinar? What are you wondering about? We'll also be connecting you to a Padlet, which is where we're going to capture some of your ideas so you can go back to it. We find that Padlet is often a good strategy to see what other people are thinking, because once you go to a webinar, a workshop, you get some new ideas. How do you take it to the next step? How do you go back and rekindle some of the ideas that we talked about? So we use that Padlet as something that you can go back to. As I said, my name is Julie Rogers Bascom. I'm the Director of Learning and Leadership here at NYLC. I've been in the service learning field for over 20 years, and Anthony Lay is accompanying me, and he is the Youth Engagement and Events Coordinator. If you could put your mics on mute right now, turn off your mics, make sure that, because we are recording and we sometimes I'm hearing a little bit of feedback. So as I said, today we're really talking about considering some of the things that we encourage you to consider while you are putting together your youth advisory council. We don't have all the answers. I know that you have a lot of the answers, so there'll be opportunities for us to learn with you as well. Well, I like to start with definitions, and this is the definition that we use here at NYLC. A youth advisory council, otherwise known as a YAC, and we'll use that broadly, is a group of young people who come together to provide advice, to provide insights and perspectives on issues that are relevant to youth for and within a particular organization. We have worked with groups, we've worked with health organizations, we've worked with cities who are encouraging young people to voice their ideas and their issues. So we've worked with schools, we've worked with nonprofits. So there's lots of spaces where Youth Advisory Council can really take hold and have a lot of impact. I think it's a real interesting time right now. I would say I get 2 or 3 inquiries a week from from groups that want to learn more about how to start a youth advisory council. I'm hoping that some of these bullets will give you some ideas to think about what it might look like in your organization. A little bit more about a youth advisory council. It's really, the goal might be, primary purpose of it is really to ensure that voices and concerns of young people are heard and considered, and they can be at different levels, as I mentioned, local, regional, national, and they can be for government agencies and nonprofits, but the ultimate goal is to create a platform for young people to really contribute to the decision-making processes that affect their lives and their well-being. They have something to say, and things are happening to them. In the chat, can you just say yes or no? What are you a part of, or do you lead a youth advisory council right now? And what is your role? So if you could just quickly, I'm going to open up my chat to take a look. I've seen some people checking in here, but do you have a youth council? Not yet, says Stacy. Amy, Inspiration for a Yak, that is a program of our org. Not yet. No. All right, so I'm seeing, yes, Jasmine has working on a national yak, and Kate is got a teen, and then the teen court bar association, and AJ is I know AJ, and I know she's working with a committee of citizens to help really start that youth advisory council. And AJ has really helped us to understand some of the questions that people are coming up with. Thanks very much. Well, again, this webinar will be sort of a high level, not step by step, because each yak is so individualized. So I think it's really important to consider how you answer some of these questions. It's not a one size fits all. So I think it's really important to ask yourself some of these questions. So let's get started. Trying to get my cursor in the right place here. I look in the work that we've done here at NYLC and studying some of the research, I think about these 7 basic areas when you're starting, launching a youth advisory council over a yak. These are some of the buckets, if you will, to consider. This is a good slide if you want to take a picture of, because that will help jog your memory, maybe. The first is why. Why do you want to have a youth advisory? What are your hope for outcomes? How do you go about recruiting? What's the structure of how are you going to structure your yak? Baseline, that's really about bringing everybody on the same, that some people say level set, but that's really about helping everyone come to be on the same line. Youth engagement, how are you going to engage youth? And then that last one, evaluation. How are you going to evaluate? So let's dig into each one of those a little bit more. So the first question I like to ask when I'm working with people when they're starting, what's your why? Define the purpose of your why. And is that the right approach for your program and the young people you're working with? Important to consider the reciprocity.
She's still hanging in, but they call us at 7 a.m. It's pretty much sounding like.
Thank you, Anthony. Think about reciprocity. We know why we might want a yak for our organization, because we get youth feedback, we get youth ideas, we get that creativity. It's really, they have a voice in the matter. What's in it for the young people? Why do we want the young? So what's that reciprocity? What do young people, how do they benefit from some of those experiences? I think about the different types, different reasons, and here are some of the things that I'm thinking about. I think a yak can be representative. It can be of members of the council. They can represent diverse backgrounds and experiences and perspectives. I think that's where we go often to a youth council. We want to understand the perspectives to make sure that we are listening to young people. Another element or another type of council or reason why might be advocacy. The youth council can advocate for policies or programs or initiatives. They can offer their insight and actually suggest improvements. And I would say all of these bullet points here, our yak has experienced some of that, some of each of these reasons why. I think one of the reasons is just for feedback. Council can provide feedback on policies or programs or services. When programs that young people are involved in, when they can give you feedback on how it's impacting them, that's really a powerful way to improve your programs. I think it's also YAC, Youth Advisory Councils, YACs, it's an opportunity to collaborate, and they often collaborate with decision makers and policy makers and organizations to grow understanding maybe. And I think it's also an opportunity. I think about how that helps a program develop, but I also think about how that helps young people develop their leadership skills, their perspective of the world, the skills that they can transfer from that experience to other spaces. Community engagement. YACs can engage in outreach to collect other young people's ideas. So it's a way for your group, you have to reach out and get further information. And again, that leadership development, that's also a great reason why. I want to read to you the mission of our Youth Advisory Council as just an example. And it really is the foundation for the why we have a Youth Advisory Council, and it helps us. It's the framework. Our mission of our YAC is to develop servant leaders who address social inequities within their communities while advising NYLC through shared decision making and program planning, bringing valuable youth perspective to NYLC's work. So that is just, if you could put that, could you put that in the chat for me, Anthony? But that is an example of our goal of where we start. Questions or comments? I'm really curious about some of your ideas. And actually, I'm going to put a link to our Padlet and ask you to help us fill out our Padlet. Our first question. Let's see if I got that right. My first question. Sorry, got to get this. That's why we have Anthony here. I was having him do a whole bunch of other things. Please take a moment, go to that link, and if you would answer the question, which is, what is your why? What are some of your whys for considering a YAC? I'm going to give you a moment here and make sure that people are able to access it. I see some people hopping on it. So what you do on that Padlet is you press that little, you see the question, what's your why for a youth council? Press that plus, and that'll give you a new screen. Oh, nothing for me without me. Yes, absolutely. We want young people's voice, youth voice. That's a great reason. Feel free to keep populating that as we go on. And again, go back to this, because this can be a repository of ideas and thoughts and ways to connect with other people. I'm just putting this Padlet on the screen in case those who are watching this from a recording. It's tinyurl.com/NYLC youth, capital Y, councils, capital C. Feel free, if you're watching this, to add your thoughts as well. The second bullet, the second thought I want us to consider is outcomes. What are your hope for outcomes? Think about your scope. The why really focuses on your underlying motivations, reasons for the YAC, while your outcomes really center around what are your anticipated results or the impacts that you want to achieve. The why really provides context and purpose, while outcome outlines the expected changes or the benefits. So some of the outcomes for youth in a youth advisory council, and we mentioned some of those before, um, growing their skills, learning about the world, building an experience or building a habit of service, growing those leadership skills and other skills. I think young people on boards and as a board intersecting with adults, learning how to communicate with adults, learning how systems work, understanding their community a little bit better. When I think about some of the outcomes for a program, I know as NYLC's YAC, some of the outcomes that we look for is that young people become stewards and champions for NYLC, for service learning, for youth leadership. They are also the connector with other youth. They build community with other youth and adult leaders across the nation and internationally. So they really are our ambassadors for the work that we do. That's a really important outcome for us to engage with our YAC. Another important outcome is for them to advise us on how the services that we provide to schools, to out of school programs, to the youth, to the adults, how we're doing. So they're a real pulse. Take a moment and in the chat, put some of the outcomes. So we're going to go back and forth between Padlet and chat, but right now, open up your chat and talk about, if you would, what are some of the outcomes you would like to see from a youth advisory council? Again, that's a different than why, but open up your chat. I'm going to move my over here so I can see it a little bit better. What are some of the reasons, the outcomes? AJ talks about a mentorship program come out of the YAC. When you're considering this is also a time, if you have a young person that you're working with, this is such an important time to include youth in this phase. So it does start building that reciprocity, that opportunity for you to partner, create those youth adult partnerships. And there was a question that came into us prior to this webinar, question about momentum in the beginning, that sometimes it's hard to get a critical group of people, critical mass engaged. And I would encourage you to consider this might be able to be addressed through including young people in your design. If we want a youth advisory council and the young people do not see the need yet, then there's some more work that needs to be done to really engage young people in helping be a part and the startings of that. Third bullet, feel free to, again, what are your outcomes? What would you like to see in a youth advisory council? Anthony, would you drop that question in the chat, please? Because I really do hope people keep adding to that, because it stimulates ideas for other people. It is recruitment. Think about recruitment, not just how, but who. Who are the young people that you want to come to be a part of your youth advisory council? What are the qualities? Yes, we want dedicated and engaged and respectful and team players. We want those young people who have those attributes or qualities. And I encourage you to think about some of the other young people who might not be the ones that are always raising their hand saying, me, me, me. looking for different perspectives really help to broaden the ideas and the feedback that you're going to receive and build partnerships with. Also, again, going back to the youth adult partnerships, consider identifying or recruiting a few young people who are already interested in this effort to help you bring others to the table. Think about the selection process. Think about your application. Think about who and how you're going to review the application. Think about the interviews. I think one of the most powerful things I noticed through our work from the YAC a couple of years ago when we were, I was working with Anthony and the YAC, and we asked the outgoing YAC members to be part of the interviewing process. And one of the young people said to me, you know, I've always been on the other side of that. I've never been on the side where I'm asking the questions and making the decisions. It's really powerful. It was transformational for that young person to have that sense of ownership and of duty. Think about where you're going to recruit. Are you going to go to schools? Are you going to hold an information session? Are you going to go to out-of-school programs? Again, remembering how do you attract multiple and different perspectives. In your recruitment, although we don't always like to have a carrot, but think about those incentives. Might there be something around food or activities or giveaways? I think about some of the tabling kinds of activities that we've all been through at conferences, at meetings, at workshops. You know, those tables that have the chocolate, that's where people go. So when you're in a space, how are you going to bring people together? What are those incentives? I'm curious if you could go, we're going to switch back to that Padlet now. If you could go to that Padlet and comment on where you have recruited youth for your advisory council. Where have you recruited youth? And thank you for putting all these great ideas for your why of a youth council in our Padlet. And Anthony, could you put that link in again? Just because I know that there are new people who have joined our call. We're really happy you're here. You already did. Focused on the YAC not being elitist, going to a team job fair to recruit. Anyone who applies will be accepted until we have to put a cap on it. Okay. All right, we have one comment on the Padlet that asks for ways to expand audience. Any ideas? Please put those on the Padlet. So thinking about how you're going to recruit, because that really is important in engaging new and different audiences. Our next bullet is really about the structure and designing the structure. It's great if you can do this with young people because they help give feedback and ideas. But think about what needs to be done to launch or collaboratively create the framework for your YAC. I think about the 3 bullets that really stand out to me in the research we've done in the YACs that we have supported, including our own. And I see those 3 bullets as really critical when you're designing your structure. That youth-led. How do you include youth voice and actually partnering with the young people who are going to be working with you? Consistency, and this is actually what young people have told us, and the research backs this up, that young people will say, we want a specific time. We want to make sure that it's every Tuesday or every other Tuesday. We want to depend on the time and the connections. I think relationships are really key to this. which leads us to that authentic youth adult partnerships. There is a difference between a young person. There are some important things that help build those youth adult partnerships. That's another workshop that we'd love to share with you at another time. But how do you build that respectful, reciprocal youth adult partnership? Other things to think about. When I was preparing for this, I was thinking about what are some of the lessons that I've learned in terms of the structure. One of the things we did several years ago is we did have young people serving 2-year terms. What we morphed to was bringing in a group year 1, and then they became year 2s, and we brought in another group. So it was like the year 2 young people were able to be the mentors. So it just developed and expanded their experience. And you really see a lot of growth. We see those second years thinking back to what they were doing the year before. It builds that empathy, that level of experience, a level of confidence. Another thing to think about is how will you, and this is probably more on the adult side, to take ownership and the leadership of this in partnership with young people, but how will you set up a charter or some kind of agreement statement, or what are your practices, your policies, your procedures, your guidelines? So what is that part of the structure? I think that's on adults in partnership with youth, but really on adults to dig into that, to design what it is that's going to be best for your youth advisory council. And there are lots of ways to get to that. We have some resources on our website that you can dig into and look a little bit more, and happy to talk with anybody after this as well. What about your resources and your funding? Is there one person that is assigned this role? And I would encourage that it not be multiple people, because I think that speaks to the importance of that consistency. But if somebody is owning the Youth Advisory Council, then the young people know that this is serious business. Think about how you communicate with each other. I communicate so much by by email. And not all young people use email. So find out what the best way to communicate is. Is it phone? Is it another kind of platform? Is it a Slack? Think about those kinds of parts that fit into your structure. Think about the timing of your meeting. What works best for you? If young people are serving on boards rather than just a youth advisory council, it's really hard for them to meet attend a lunch meeting. So if you're serious about involving young people, make sure that it works for a young person's time frame. Also, if you have a board that young people, which is a little different than a youth advisory board or council, if you're asking young people to sit on a board, I encourage you to ask 2 young people to sit on the board so they can learn together, so they don't feel like the kid in the corner. So I encourage you to think about that. Now, I'm looking at some notes, and I think there was somebody asked a question about that at the very beginning, when there's a lot of volunteers to start a youth council, and I'm thinking the comment might have been there were a lot of adults that wanted to start the youth council. The work is slow. Yes, the work can sometimes be slow. Go back to your design, and how are you including youth in your design? Because that will help with sustainability, which is what we're all working towards, is how do you sustain a youth council? If you establish goals and objectives, your why and your hope for outcomes with youth, then you can look at how you're meeting them and creating a plan for changing to improvement. So you're always looking at, how is this working? Does this go back to the beginning, to your why and to your outcomes? I mentioned about having an adult be assigned to this. Question for Anthony, our YAC coordinator, although his title is different than that, but he is really the go-to guy for our yak. I have a question for you. How do you, what's your work in sustaining a yak?
Um, a few things that come to mind about sustaining a yak is um, creating a relationship and creating communication between the youth and then the leader. It's important to connect with them how they prefer, um, as they're also busy and in their lives. And then also just trusting them, trust that they will do the work that needs to be done, and letting them lead their projects. And then that's how you also build their engagement, keeping them engaged by letting them uh, research and take action on their passions. I think it's really important so they retain that engagement and want to be a part of this program. Those are a few things that I've noticed when working with RYAC.
So relationship, trust, and engagement. How, give me an example. I'm putting you on the spot here, but give me an example of how the young people are. We have this conference coming up, and 25 to 30% of the people who come to the National Service Learning Conference are young people. And so our YAC is really charged with creating a space for activities and things to do at the conference for young people. Anthony, what does that look like? How are they planning that? How have you structured that so so they're experiencing success and we're listening to youth voice?
Yeah. So an example would be like the Youth Summit, which is the first day
Mhm.
of the conference. They take charge of planning the entire agenda for that day, what issues they would like to tackle, finding those speakers for those workshops, um, filling in the gaps with activities and breaks and whatnot. Um, but we introduce the youth summit is, and then we let them take a crack at it. Meaning,
Mm.
uh, they just get into committees of like either marketing or event coordination, and they kind of plan out based on the second years who are at youth advisory councils who have been in members that have been in there for 2 years. They kind of become like the leaders and the mentors of how it looked the year before, when they first experienced it. So it's kind of like a mentorship while introducing the new ideas of the first years, and then they all come together to put on the event.
What I loved how you talked about how you really gave them some structure. I mean, it's not like you say, okay, go plan this, because that's not exactly how youth voice works. I mean, I like to talk about how you partner with young people because they don't always know, like in many of us, if something's new to us, we don't always know the questions to ask. So that's an example of creating a structure and really allowing youth voice to develop. Thank you so much, Anthony. Appreciate that. Next bullet here that I want to talk about is baseline. And that's not the right word. I was looking for a word other than level set because I think I'm starting to feel like level set is an overused term. But it really is about how do you get everybody on the same page? How will you orient the youth to the task at hand? How will you include training for the youth? And how will you include training for the adults? If the adults are working with young people, it's really important for them to have an understanding of what youth voice looks like and what an youth adult partnership looks like. It's being able to say, to build on young people's ideas or ask questions to help them rather than saying, no, I don't think that will work out. I think there's a lot of unlearning that sometimes adults need to do in their work with youth. The importance of community building at this point, answering this bullet point baseline, is really critical. And it's not just for the youth, but it's for the adults. How do we practice those partnerships? So my question to you to consider this bullet point is, How can you bring everybody on board? What are the ways that you are bringing people together so they have a clear understanding? So that's really critical at this point. My next slide, youth engagement. How will youth be involved in the meetings and their activities? What are the roles and responsibilities of youth and adults? I'm going to show you one of my favorite videos. And I want you, while you're looking at this video, I want you to consider the balance between adult support and youth voice. So think about that when we're looking at this video. And Anthony, if you'll give me a thumbs up to show that you can hear it.
सर आपके लिए उस पार कार का इंतजाम किया है सर। सर आइए सर। ये चल चल इधर जाओ, बोलना क्या बात करता है, क्या ऊपर से जाएगा, क्या ऊपर से जा जा।
गया मेन शो।
I hate this country. कुछ करो ना।
अब मैं वहां जाके क्या उखाड़ लूंगा?
कैसी जाने बूंदे आई, जाने कैसा दर्द लाई, सामने क्या है ये तेरे, क्यों रुका है तू बता रे हो। कौन तुझको पार लेगा, कौन होगा वो मसीहा, जिसे तू ढूंढता है वो ही है तू वही है। तुझ में तेरा रास्ता है, तुझ में तेरा है सहारा, तू ही तुझको पार लेगा, तू ही है तेरा किनारा। रास्ता है, तुझ में तेरा है सहारा, तू ही तुझको पार लेगा, तू ही है तेरा किनारा। जिसे ढूंढता है तू ही रे, तू ही रे, तू ही रे तेरा मसीहा हो।
One of my favorite videos. So if anybody would like to turn their mic on and share, where did you see youth voice? And where did you see adult support in this video? Anyone?
This is Rosemary. After stopping crying from watching it, you know, just to see this little boy who is so young, taking the bull by the horns and saying, this is what needs to be done, and hesitation on the part of the adults initially, to, you know, seeing him as not being able to pull it off, and then here we have it. Tree is moved.
Yeah. I think this is such a great example of what young people bring to the table. They bring that creativity. They bring the ideas, and their his voice, his action. He was going to get her done. Yeah, thanks.
You know, Julie, you said something earlier, and I think it's probably the greatest barrier to successful youth advisory councils or YACs or whatever we call them, and that is that the adults need to let go. And I think one of the things we really need to develop, and I think this is a collaborative development, is how do we as leaders in the movement of youth leadership take and create a training type program that's not just academic, but also experiential, to show the adults the positive things that can happen when youth voice is empowered.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It is a skill to empower youth voice. It absolutely is. And thank you, Rosemary. It is about unlearning and about building our skills to really help support young people to develop those skills, and centering on that youth adult partnership. Absolutely. Thanks, Rosemary. Any other ideas? Anybody else want to turn their mic on and share what you observed in that video?
The ability to trust, once you see a youth starting something and doing it, being able to full-fledged just trust and garner the support of other adults to support them in their initiative and what they are desiring to achieve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Trust. And what the adults brought to that scenario, clearly it's dramatized, but what they brought is resources. They brought their strength. They brought something to help get her done. And the ideas of what young people are bringing to the table, what adults are bringing to the table, so to speak, and building that trust. Oh, we can look to adults to help us with this. Oh, we can look to youth to give us some creativity and some ideas. Yeah, thank you so much, Jasmine. Thank you. I'll move ahead just because I always take more time than what I told you. I said 45 minutes and already we're close to the, we're getting close, guys. But that was an important video and an idea to think about. But when you're thinking about the roles and responsibilities for youth and adults, think about how can you build in some roles that young people can do? Can they plan the meetings? Can they take the meeting notes? Can they facilitate the meetings? Can they help with recruitment? I mean, those are all important things to make a youth advisory council run, but it's also the building their own skills in doing that. And whatever it takes to support them. I see a lot of my children, you know, they're not used to picking up a phone and talking on the phone. So that we've worked with scripts and what are you going to say? So those sorts of things to break down the barriers for young people to feel successful. Some of the adult responsibilities that can be done with youth, it just depends on what youth you have to work with you, but you know, creating the structure and the consistency of those meetings, I think that's on an adult's most times, especially at the beginning, that's on the adult shoulders. We all know providing food and snacks for meetings. I mean, that would be an adult role that I think would be appropriate. Grant writing, other kind of education, onboarding, orientation, those sorts of things are things that adults can assume responsibility and eventually, if not initially, work with creating young people to take ownership of that. Anthony, I wanted to ask you to read something from one of our yaks. So if you would go ahead and share the quote, give us some context.
Sure. We have a quote from one of our Youth Advisory Council members, Grace, who is a second-year Youth Advisory Council member. She stated that by being a part of the YAC, we get so many opportunities to not only grow practical leadership skills, but also learn how to be a better global citizen. Being on the YAC gives us access to valuable growing and learning opportunities, which definitely keep us engaged because we're working on issues that we care deeply about. I think what really makes me love being part of the YAC is how welcoming and supportive NYLC is. I feel like we're truly a community/family that can do meaningful work together, which gives me a lot of joy and motivates me to keep engaging.
So I don't ask Anthony to read that and go, oh, NYLC, great job. But what that does is demonstrate a young person's reflection on her experience of being asked to belong, to be a part of something. And we have learned so much from Grace. We will I didn't build this in yet here, but we will be releasing the application for our Youth Advisory Council. When, Anthony? When will that be released?
That'll
Is
be
it in
released.
April?
Yep, April 3rd.
Okay. So if you don't already get our newsletter that announces these sort of things, there'll be a link where you can sign up to that. You can share then this opportunity with maybe some of the young people you're working with, although we don't want to take them off your Youth Advisory Council, but maybe there are spaces or places where you think it would be good for a young person that you're working with.
Can I just add something to that, to what you just said?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. This is Rosemary from Campfire in Washington, D.C. I think it's really important for kids to serve on our YACs, but I think it's also important for them to have experience on other YACs or other advisory committees. I know that we've had numbers of young people from our that have served on the Campfire YAC and then have stepped up to serve on a national YAC, like at NYLC or at the National Campfire YAC, or right now we have a young person that's going to go on the advisory board for one of the local legislators. And so I think that we prepare them, but sometimes the cross-fertilization, for lack of a better word, enriches they learn things that we don't think to teach them.
And different perspectives, and they learn about how another organization works. I think that's a really valid, really important comment. Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you. This last bullet point, I think, is often a forgotten point to consider. Evaluate after every year. Go back to your why, to your outcomes. Evaluate and monitor. Create a monitoring or an evaluation plan with the young people, because that leads to sustainability in my mind. You determined what you wanted to do. Now you can consider how to measure and reflect. How did you meet your goals? So just consider how you want to build those in. Again, those 7 elements. Think about. I'm going to quickly, any thoughts or comments on evaluation? Has anybody ever evaluated their Youth Advisory Council on a systemic or a... I think it's an interesting thing to build in, and I encourage you to think about, how does that look? I want to talk really briefly about some barriers to Youth Advisory Councils. I think sometimes some young people aren't provided with enough support or enough structure. I think if they have other activities or they forget to attend. I think there's also the turnover, the change. I think those are sometimes some barriers. Sometimes the structure, so that was, youth are not provided support. Sometimes the structure isn't right to fit your goals. Sometimes the scheduling or additional cost or transportation or training. Sometimes the structure doesn't work. And I would say that last bullet point, and I'm singing to the choir right now, but that lack of positive and strong youth adult partnerships. Adults can sometimes be, the directors, and a young person, we heard from Grace, she felt like she had something to contribute. And so, how do we talk to young people? How do we say yes and rather than yes but? So those are just some thoughts. Any other contributions, any other ideas that you would like to add about some of the barriers you have faced? Not enough momentum in the beginning. That was a comment earlier. Any other thoughts?
I'll speak up, Julie. Hi, it's nice to see you.
Hi.
I think one of the barriers, that I've been brutally reminded of today, was youth partnership. Like, how do you get somebody on board? Where do you find the first youth to start giving their input. So I've got a group of adults and we have no youth voice yet. And I'm like, we still don't know what the youth want. You know, here we are putting this thing together and we still don't know what the youth want.
What's the thing you're putting together, AJ?
A youth advisory council for my city.
So it's a city it's to give advice or support or ideas on the city.
Yes. Yep.
I would go to your high school. You know, how do you get into the high school, and who's a teacher who might want to partner with you, or a dean or a principal or something like that, and think about what is the need. Think about your why and what do you hope, what are you looking for? So being real clear. I think sometimes when you ask a young person, will you be on an advisory council, they're like, I don't know what that means. So really sketching out what it is that they're getting themselves into. What both how is it good for your community, how is it going to be, how will it benefit the young person? So I would just and I would build some partnerships with people at your school and at your city, because there might be some other ways that they have involved youth already. So build on those successes. Where have there been some pockets where it's already happening? Other thoughts, other ideas from our friends on the call?
I have a quick question.
This is Rosemary. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Gabriela.
Hi. I'm the activities director at my high school, and we have several student organizations and clubs. But in the last few years, particularly after the pandemic, como que our culture right now is, as long as the groups or these councils exist, we're done. And I'm struggling because what I'm noticing is that there's a lot of youth that want to do something, but are lacking certain skills of turning ideas into concrete action plans, but also I have adults who are advisors they need to figure it out on their own, but then we're falling into a vicious cycle of student groups and student or councils are not doing anything. So they just meet. So my question is, where would be that fine line between that positive youth and adult relationship? If there's skills, like, do you teach them the skills? Do you just let them fail? But I just feel that we're never, ever going to break the cycle.
Good question. Very, very good question. So I think creating a process, being real clear on what it is your goal is. What is it that you want from young people, or what these clubs that young people are a part of? How are they coming together? I'm actually thinking about, we have a couple of after school, there are books called handbooks for after school, but it is actually a protocol. It's 14 lessons or sessions where it guides young people and the adults that support them through a process of asking questions and getting, building some skills. So I would consider, and I'm happy to talk to you more about that, Gabriela, at another time, but really digging into kind of a process. It is skill building, but young people need to also help define what it is that they want to do. I think putting young people in a space and just say, go to it, I think you're missing that. There's an opportunity for them to grow and develop those skills. So my first response right now is to think about, how do you guide them through? I think we are facilitators. Other
Julie,
thoughts? Go ahead. Yeah.
Julie, to answer to AJ's thing, don't forget that you've got lots of youth organizations in your community where young people have to have some commitment to the community to earn recognition or awards. The Boy Scouts, their Eagle Scouts, the Campfire Kids, their Wohelo Award, the Girl Scouts, their Gold Awards, 4-H has its own set of awards, YMCA has its own set of awards. and going to those organizations and helping them, asking them to help you identify young people who might benefit from being on a municipal committee that may have been on one of their committees and therefore would be a valuable member because they have a little bit of training behind them.
Really good idea. Good, important idea. Thank you, Rosemary. Look in the chat. Shared group norms and commitments. Absolutely. And I think, Julia, that is so important because you need to agree to sort of that comment that we were talking about earlier about your structure. Make sure you have agreements or norms or commitments. Absolutely.
I think that has really helped us. And I think it's also like treating young people like adults. Like you said, you'd show up, you said you would do this. If you're frustrated, nothing's happening. Well, are you doing what you said? Like there's a balance of obviously, you know, they're young people and we're teaching those, but if they committed to those things into each other, you're like, cool. Well, if you want the next 3 months to be more productive, remember, we all committed to each other. We committed to these things. We agreed upon these things. So how can we shift? Otherwise, you might get 6 months. Like if at the end of the 6 months or whatever, and nothing feels like it's happened, that's on y'all in some sense, you know, like, and that you have ownership of that. And I think that's important too, because we do that with each other and our coworkers. We're like, look, if the project doesn't get done because you didn't do it, that's on y'all. Like, and I think, you know, treating young people with the respect and the autonomy they do have is also part of allowing them to grow and learn. And so that's been really helpful for us to be able to point back to those.
I love what you said about expectations, you know, setting expectations and holding them to it. Yeah. Thank you, Julia. Thank you so much. And you mentioned earlier, and I didn't get to that, but you pay your young people.
Yeah, we pay them $20 an hour. And so, and you know, getting young people to show up is hard. We have 17 people technically on our council, and we do that on purpose because half will come every meeting, and we just know that, and they get paid for what meeting they come to. So we don't hound them. We're like, you know, you can only do so much, but if you show up, you get paid. They know that. That's the agreement, and then they get paid at the end of the term. And because they are professional, like if you value leadership from young people, then pay for it like you would anybody else's input in your organization. I think that's how do you make it an organizational value and not just a program. Like a YAC isn't a program, it's a part of your leadership structure. And so it's shifting that within your organization.
Well said. I think paying young people too, it can sometimes be an equity issue. There are young people that sometimes can't participate in anything extracurricular because they are working after school to bring money home. And so they lose out on some of those opportunities because of economics or because of other structural reasons. Any other thoughts or ideas?
I would just add that, you know, going along with treating them as adults, I think that adults give our time to things when we have a sense of meaning and a sense of belonging, right? Going back to that hierarchy of needs. And so if you're just putting a youth advisory group together so that they can pick the color of the poster or so that you can say that you have them, they're going to read into that. But I think that connection to adults who don't have a youth advisory board because we have so much to teach you children, but rather having a youth advisory board because there's so much that we can learn from you. Youth pick up on that, and then they want to be engaged. They feel valued. They know that you want them there. They know they're doing meaningful work, because when it's lip service, they won't show up.
Right. Very well said. Thank you. Thank you so much. Kate, do you go by Kate?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kate. We'll move on. I know that I've kept you way long. It's always Julie plus 20. But I did want to move on to some of the resources that we have at NYLC, nylc.org/resources, I think. Anthony, if you could put that in the chat for me. We have a book on getting started in service learning. We have a series of books called Engage. These are handbooks for the after school programs, but it is something that I think a lot of spaces can use in how you're gathering your youth advisory councils, because there's openers, there's energizers, there's how you structure your meeting is not always just a memo. It's not always an agenda. It's other kinds of activities and things that are engaging to young people. We have some handbooks on service learning based on the Sustainable Development Goals, which might be interesting for you all if one of your groups is working on a specific issue that might have to do with the Sustainable Development Goals. We also have tons of podcasts where you hear stories of young people who are really making a difference in the world. In fact, if you have a story of a young person that you would like them to be highlighted, drop your email in the chat. And Anthony also supports that program. We'd love to hear more stories. So those are this is the marketing plug here, but these are free resources. So please check those out. We have a service learning community of practice that we invite young people to join and to be a part of conversations like this. We have, as I mentioned before, an upcoming service learning conference, April 3rd through the 6th. The April 3rd is a full day of youth. What is it, Anthony? It's a youth April 3rd.
A youth summit.
A youth summit where the YAC is planning this right now. Our YAC is planning this right now, where they come to learn about leadership and being engaged in their community. The conference is also 2 days of workshops, and then that last day, April 6th, is our day of service, where we go out into the community and be of service. If you want to know a little bit more about us and you want to subscribe to the leader, Anthony's going to put the link in the chat as well, or you can hover over that. It'll take you right to our link or right to a web page where you can sign up for our newsletter, and that will announce when we release the application for our next round of Youth Advisory Council members. It also will tell you when we release the application for one of our signature programs, which is Youth as Solutions, which is a partnership between adult and young people to use the service learning process. In the chat, this is my final reflection. We reflect before, during, and after. You've noticed that I asked you a lot of questions. In the chat or on the Padlet, post words or phrases that represent any new ideas about youth advisory councils that you have. Feel free to either put it on the Padlet, or if you put it in the chat. Sometimes it's easier. I like to give people both options. I'm going to go over to my Padlet, take a look at that. And then I will also share with you my email if you want to follow up at all with me, Julie Rogers Bascom, jrbascom@nylc.org. If you have a question, follow-up comment, thinking about some ideas, want to have a conversation, please feel free to reach out. I love hearing about your stories. I think this is important work, and I'm hoping we're moving from kind of having it be the thing that everybody does, youth voice, to something that is sustainable, that's part of, Julia, you really said that so beautifully. It's part of your structure. It's part of your design. So I appreciate that. Colby was asking about sharing this presentation. Yes, we will share this presentation. Thank you all so very, very much. Laura, great to see you. Really appreciate you all being here. Take good care.